and to reassure ourselves that it's hopeful, not hopeless, that we can make a case for peace. We also want to know what are some of the preconditions for a new beginning, and finally, we can hear maybe some ideas, some suggestions about what institutions, which individuals will play a role in this process. Thank you. That's all you will hear from me, except later on when I try to moderate this debate. And I'd like to ask Professor Halper to begin his 15 minutes.
Well, I heard that I have 15 minutes, about 5 times, so I got the message. No, it's very good to be here and really great to meet young people at the university in particular. I'm the head of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, which is an Israeli grassroots political organization that's dedicated to ending the Israeli occupation, period. Now, that used to mean a two-state solution. In other words, the idea was that the occupation, I'll show you a map in a minute, is that the occupation is over the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem. And that was ending the occupation. Today, and we can talk about this during the discussion, today there are many of us that feel that the two-state solution might be gone. That in fact the Israeli settlements are so huge, the wall is being built, Israel's what we call our facts on the ground are so massive that the chance of actually getting a viable Palestinian state in the occupied territories, even though the occupied territories are only 22% of historic Palestine, seems very, very dim. Not hopeless, because if it was hopeless, I wouldn't be here. I'd be home writing my anthropology books like I'd rather be doing. And in fact, that's one of our messages, and that is that we're a part of civil society with all of you, we're all partners, and that this is a political conflict. It's not a clash of civilizations, it's not good guys and bad guys. This is a political conflict, and as such, it has a political solution. And our job together is to work for that solution. And certainly, the Palestinians have been struggling now for more than 60 years. And you know, it would be a terrible thing to say to them, after all the struggle and the sacrifice, this is hopeless. Forget it. You have to live forever under occupation and apartheid. So obviously that's not our message. I think the idea of the title was, where do we find the hope? And how do we work? And how do we change things? But where I think all three of us are coming from the place of saying, we can resolve this conflict, we can achieve justice, and it's our responsibility to do so. Me as an Israeli, and Richard as an American, and Dr. Lucha, I don't want to call him doctor. Anna, and Anna as a German. So let me just take a couple minutes, not to assume that everybody knows all the details of this conflict, and just go over a couple basic things with some maps in order to ground our discussion a little bit. You know, I'm an anthropologist, and anthropologists approach the world from the ground up. In other words, if there's a conflict between what I see on the ground and what politicians are telling me, I believe what's happening on the ground. That's where you can read the intent. So if Israel says we want peace, and at the same time it's building settlements, 24 hours a day, what do you believe? The declaration or the facts on the ground? And so our analysis is literally a grounded analysis. It comes from our being there and trying to figure out what's happening. So essentially, let me just say this, that this is a map of what we call the two-state solution. And this is a solution that is accepted by the international community. The Roadmap Initiative, that is the current diplomatic initiative with the Quartet, which is a sad commentary, led by the United States, the Quartet, where Europe is a member, Russia is a member, and the UN is kind of the fourth rump member of the Quartet, which shows us where the UN is these days, unfortunately. But the Roadmap Initiative is based on the idea of a two-state solution. The Palestinians accepted the two-state solution more than 20 years ago. In 1988, in Algiers, they accepted the two-state solution. The two-state solution was also accepted in 2002 by the Arab League in what's called the Arab Peace Plan, the Arab Peace Initiative, or sometimes it's called the Saudi Initiative. So that, in a sense, you might say that this is the plan, agreed upon by the entire international community, plus the Arab League, plus the Palestinians themselves. Now, it's not a fair and just solution, as you can see from looking at the map. Because today, if we look at this as one country, from the Mediterranean to the Jordan River, this is the country the Palestinians call Palestine. This is the country Israeli Jews call the Land of Israel. Religious people call it the Holy Land. But it's one country. And in this one country, today, half the population is Palestinian. Today. That's before the return of any refugees. There are more than 4 million refugees living in all the countries around, in Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. So that when refugees return, there will be a Palestinian majority in this country. And yet, the Palestinians have said, we will make peace for Israel on less than a quarter of the land. In other words, all the occupied territories, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza, comprise only 22% of historic Palestine. So, you often hear of Ehud Barak's generous offer. That is simply a myth. There never was any such thing. But you never hear of the Palestinians' generous offer. That might in fact be too generous an offer. And that is to say to Israelis, we will make peace with you. We will recognize the state of Israel on 78% of our historic homeland in return for a Palestinian state on the 22% that remains. And Israel has said no. Israel has said no. So that we have to understand that this is not a symmetrical conflict. We reject a false symmetry. The discourse that says both sides should negotiate, both sides should end the violence. No. This is not an equal conflict. There's only one side that's a state. The Palestinians don't have a state.